In 1989, the Gold Rolex Day-Date was about $8,000 retail, and it's now what, 60,000. If you look at that over 30 years of history, it's probably more or less kept up with inflation. My father starting the business in 1942, and my mother took a shop 80 Castlereagh Street as a hobby. And we started with Rolex, a few years later Patek Philippe. And when I joined the business in 89, she had a seven-figure debt. We had some tough times in the 90s, but the turning point was the Olympics in 2000. Nearly sold out of Rolex during the Olympics. The last 24 years, our turnover has increased every year. We've been consistent, but we've been very lucky. It's been an incredible run.
Hello, Julian. How are you?
Good. Sorry
Love
about
the office.
the winter beard. I went away to Fiji 2 weeks ago, and I've kept the beard.
How's the weather in Fiji?
Unreal and very, very sad coming back.
Do you do much sailing? I see
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah. I've been sailing since I was 13 years old. I do ocean racing. I've done Sydney Hobart. I've done lots of sailing around the world, all sorts of things.
Very cool. I learned a bit of sailing last year. I was on a boat, I think the Adams 10.
Yep.
It was like really, really cool just learning and then
Mm.
seeing how everyone works together and learning about the terms. I definitely get it.
Yeah, Adams 10 have been around a long time, but they're a good boat.
That's awesome.
In
Thank you so
fact, in
much.
the background there, I think there's a sailing photo there. That's when we did Sydney Hobart.
Oh, wow. How many people does it take to man that boat? Or how many
I
people
think
do you like to run with?
that one, I think we had 13 or 14 on for Hobart.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
And how long did it take to go from Sydney to Hobart?
I think we did it in 3 days. We actually had a great first day flying down the coast, but we had a big problem when we got to Tasmania. We had no wind, so we actually have on the tracker pictures of us going backwards with the current, and we just sat there and we watched I think about 15 or 16 other boats sail up to us, and then they sat in the no wind with us.
Do you sleep on the boat and then like when it's nighttime you just put
Yeah,
down the sails and
once
sleep?
you sort of we start midday or so for the race, and first up until about maybe 10 o'clock p.m. You're all on deck, but then you start into a shift system where we break it up into basically three crews, and at any one time, one crew will be down. Let's say four people will be down for 2 hours, and then we just rotate that for 24 hours a day.
Whoa, that's intense.
Mm, yeah, yeah, but yeah, we were lucky with the weather, so I'm one and done.
Awesome. I guess we'll jump right into it. Julian, yeah, how I first came across about you, I think got into watches probably around 2018. So over the last 4 or 5 years, and being in Sydney, you own one of the sort of the main stores when it comes to watches, and you guys have been established for quite some time. I had you on the list of sort of people I've wanted to interview and bring on the show, and that's how this came together.
Good, good, good. Yeah, yeah. Well, we've had a wonderful history. My father starting the business in 1942. It's been through a couple of transformation or number of transformations. He basically, when he got out discharged from the war, he started importing watches. He was a great entrepreneur. He'd been trained by his brother as a watchmaker, and in the war effort, they drafted him to be an instrument maker. And so when he got out, he started importing watches. It was very difficult to get importation licenses for watches after the war and during the war. And then he sort of started setting up his J Farren-Price stores. And at one stage, we eventually had 100 stores throughout Australia and New Zealand, selling nice quality Swiss watches, um, some branded watches, like we've been selling Tudor and Rolex since the 1950s. And then also with our own J Farren-Price name on them. He would design them, give them names, promote them, call them pathfinders and all this kind of thing. And he was a very good promoter. And sadly, that business was well affected in the 70s, but by the quartz watch from the Japanese, and it really hurt the whole Swiss industry. And we chose at that time to shut that big company down. And my mother took a shop at 80 Castlereagh Street as a hobby. And we started with Rolex and a few years later Patek Philippe. And we expanded it once, we expanded twice, we expanded three times. And in 2019, we added a second level and expanded for the fourth time. And as of next year, we'll be on this site for 50 years. So we've been very steady and stable and just done what we do best.
Did your mother take on the store around the same time that you guys started scaling back down your father? Or did she take on the store well before that?
I think the business was in the process of scaling down, and the complete history is that the location we're at, there was a building before this called the St James Centre. There was a picture theatre here and a tower, office tower. And I remember as a kid, probably when I was 5 years old or so, coming here, and the cinema was here. And they knocked the building down in the late 60s, and it took a very, very long time for them to rebuild it. And they had a lot of problems. They had some imported labour, and the site was had a union ship, and it took them about 8 years to build the building. And when they closed it down, they said to my mother and father, "Oh, when we rebuild, we'll offer you a store in there." So my understanding is that sometime around 1974 or 75, the building was finished, and they called my parents. It was in this transitionary period where they were probably struggling with the big enterprise. And they offered the store, and Mum said to my father, "Oh, it could be a nice little hobby for me." And so they opened it up. And so we had a couple of things happen there that must just fate happening, that we were offered this store, that Mum decided to take it, and she ran with it from there.
And then when you guys completely scaled down where there were no more other franchisees, did your father go all in on this same store as well and came in with your mother and put all his attention into the current store?
Look, my mother was 20 years younger than my father. My dad was fairly mature by 1975. Mum mainly ran it, but I know Dad did have a hand in us getting Patek Philippe in 1978. He would have been involved, I think, in going over there and convincing them that to come back onto the Australian market. Patek Philippe had been on the market in the 60s with Prouds, actually, when Prouds was like Tiffany's is today. But for whatever reason, Patek stopped with Prouds, and Patek Philippe was off the market for a while, and then we were the first people to re-establish it on the market in 1978.
Talking about sort of establishing that relationship, like, why is it so difficult? Like, I would have thought brands would want to reach as many different countries as possible, and they'd want to sort of give sort of watch stores opportunities to sell their products, but it seems like they're doing the opposite. They're very, very particular.
Yeah, look, I guess we're seeing a phenomenon at the moment that many of the brands want to do more turnover with less retailers. But if we go back to 1978 and Patek Philippe in Australia, Australia was not the watch market back then that it is now, and most people, 99% of people, I'm sure, would not have known what a Patek Philippe was. And Patek, back at that stage, I don't know the production, it might have been 5,000 watches a year. And Australia was a very, very long way away. Not small population, wouldn't have been very, very high on their radar. But that brand's grown to produce today in the vicinity of 70,000 watches. They had the world's first auction for a brand in 1989 to celebrate their 150th anniversary, where they got phenomenal prices for their older watches. That really seemed to launch them in the stratosphere. And then there's been a lot of luxury come to Australia in the last 20 years, and it's now a world economy, and the local market knows all the top brands and wants all the top brands, and it's a very, very different market to the 1970s.
That's great insight, Julian. With brands like Patek, given that you've been in the space for so long, what do you think sort of had them cross the line into sort of the culture and having it be so popular as it is currently over the last, I guess, decade or two? What takes a brand from sort of being a sleeper, sort of low key, to being something that there's a wait list for?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. Where the magic comes, it can be a lot of circumstances. I think Patek Philippe and a number of the brands we represent, Rolex, Vacheron Constantin, I think the thing is consistency. They've been consistent over a long period of time, stuck to their core message, just refined their products. I mean, Rolex is a phenomenon. I mean, Hans Wilsdorf founded Rolex, absolute genius of a man. You know, one of the first people in the world to use sports stars and explorers as ambassadors for the brand. When you had Mercedes Glites in the early 1930s swim the English Channel with the first waterproof wristwatch Rolex on, it was front page news in the English newspapers. But you know, they haven't been a brand that's revolutionary. They're more evolutionary, and so Patek and Vacheron, you know, they just constantly strive to make their product better, higher quality, more reliable. And then there's other factors that come into effect. Like, as I said, Patek was very clever in 1989 to have this themed auction just for their brand, which really alerted people to how collectible Patek was. And again, you know, when the 70s quartz crisis was on, these brands didn't throw their hand up in the air and say, "Oh, we've got to get into the quartz game." You know, they knew it was probably a short-term thing, and they stuck to their knitting and continued with making beautiful mechanical watches. And you know, that's why they've risen to the top of their game.
Are there any brands that you see that follow the same vein of sort of consistency? Other brands that might be lesser known at the moment, but you can sort of see the similarities, and you feel if you were to buy stock, those would be brands that you would invest in?
Well, obviously, I put my money where my mouth is, and in terms of the brands we carry, and we have a beautiful selection of brands that I'm very proud to represent. I mean, we could look at a brand like Grand Seiko, which you know, a couple of years ago celebrated their 60th anniversary. They have that Japanese eye for detail and perfection. I love Lexus's slogan, "A passion for perfection." I think that applies to Grand Seiko as well. And so they do very good quality watches. Their dials are extraordinary. But again, it's been a slow build. And they've just been consistent in what they do. There is a theme that a lot of these businesses are independent and not part of a big corporation. I think that gives them a lot more freedom not to be answerable to shareholders and be able to look a bit more long term. They don't have to look every day to see their share prices expanding. They can make long term decisions. And you tend to have a nicer relationship with a company like that, you know, with Rolex, Patek Philippe, Grand Seiko. You know, it's a bit more of a family feel to it.
When it comes to sort of becoming, you know, opening up a watch store, how does one go about becoming an authorized dealer for like a brand like Rolex? Is that doable? Can anyone sort of do it, or do you sort of need sort of an inside person nowadays?
It's almost impossible. Everyone would love to represent Rolex, and to be a new player is very, very difficult. They already have an established network. They already have established partners. If they went with a partner, they want someone with experience in the industry. You know, if somebody new came, that they don't know how they're going to perform, how they're going to behave, whether they're going to respect the product. So it's a much better option for them to stick with people they know. And as I said in the beginning, it seems the current trend is for the brands to want to do more with fewer retailers. So they're not really looking to expand their network, if anything, around the world. In some places, maybe where there's historical reasons, being too many retailers, they're sort of tightening it up a bit.
Got it. As a sort of dealer where you're sort of selling these key brands, is your performance directly tied into how well the brands that you sort of sell are performing? And let's say if Rolex is just having a tougher year, are you guys also affected? If so, is there any way to negate that?
Sorry, could you just explain that question to me again?
Yeah, let me rephrase it.
Yeah.
If Rolex is sort of doing well, do you guys find you guys are also doing well? And if they're performing lesser well, let's say they get some bad PR, are you guys affected and you guys get less sales because of that?
Yeah. Look, Rolex, a couple of brands we sell are just almost don't follow the market. And Rolex would be one of the key ones. They are so strong. They're in such high demand. They're an icon. And so in answer to your question, we could have a dip in other sections of our business, but Rolex tends to keep chugging along pretty strongly. It's a phenomenal product. I've been to the factory. It's something out of the space age, but also combined with traditional crafts. The quality of what they do and the testing, they get some metal in, they get some steel in, and they check it under a microscope to check that it's 100% pure. If there's a little bit of boron in it or something, they'll go back to the supplier and say, how come the steel got a bit of boron in it? And they say, oh, well, the job before yours was we smelted something with boron in it, and we mustn't have cleaned the crucible correctly, and there's just some trace elements there. So Rolex just say, take it back. It's not our quality. They look at everything with a microscope, and just an amazing brand. They deserve the position they have. I think they've been voted one of the most valuable brand names in the world, if not the most valuable brand name. And the incredible thing is that Hans Wilsdorf left it as a foundation. So they are truly independent, and they can do everything at their own pace. They don't have to be under pressure. And so they can just, always provide a quality product.
That's beautiful. Another thing I've noticed is as you're sort of nerding about and telling me about the factories and all that detail, one thing I realize is that a lot of your staff, everyone is very knowledgeable when it comes to watches, horology, what it's made of. I can ask a bunch of questions, and usually 9 out of 10 times they'll have the answer. Do you usually find staff that already are into watches and already have that knowledge, or do you have a pretty cool training process to somehow get them up to date with everything?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that we don't change staff very easily. I work very, very hard to keep my staff, and many of them been here a long time. And that comes back to what you just brought up. It is very, very hard for me to acquire new staff who are going to have the knowledge across the range of products that we carry. And, all the brands we represent, they expect us to be experts in what we do, and to cross the T's and dot the I's, and, have the answers to the questions, which we try and do. We can't have every detail for every product. But in answer to the training question, all the brands tend to have their training programs. And of course, we do training in store with a new staff member. But it is a challenge for us actually to get new staff. Of course, apart from I think 10 watch brands that we represent, and we're just about to add H. Moser to that list. There's also all the jewellery brands we represent. Half our business is jewellery. So we have imported brands, we make our own, so we've got to be experts in gems as well as watches. So the depth of knowledge you need to work at J Farren-Price is huge.
Do you have children working at the store? Is it going to be third generation?
I do actually have my eldest daughter working here in marketing. She's been here for a couple of years now. She's a very bright young lady, and she's very good at what she does. And we'll just have to wait and see whether it goes in the third generation. I've got a younger daughter who loves our product, loves luxury. She's in the beauty industry at the moment. She might transition in, but we'll have to wait and see whether it ends up being a third generation or not. I never push. I've obviously given the opportunity, because if you push them one way, they'll go the other. It's their choice, and it'll be what it'll be. But I've got a bit of legs left in me yet. I love what I do. I've got, as I said, lovely staff, beautiful products to sell, lovely suppliers, and I have a wonderful group of customers. So as long as that all continues, I hope to stick around for a while.
Given that you sort of own a watch store, does that mean your partner, your daughters are just surrounded by watches, and birthdays, it's just simple for them, they're just surrounded and jaded by it at this point, or not really? You keep them quite sort of away from it?
Well, it actually depends on who we're talking about. My wife loves her jewellery and watches. My youngest daughter, as I just said, she's already decided, what engagement ring she wants, and Dad, I love this watch and what have you. My eldest daughter in marketing is a very simple girl. She loves a few nice pieces, but she's not a consumer like the other two.
I love that. You mentioned retention of staff. Any tips there? We're in a time where a lot of people are jumping jobs every year, every second year, but you've done an amazing job having staff retained for, decades at a time. Any tips when it comes to sort of staff retention, Julian?
Look, as I said, we're a family business which has a different vibe to a corporation. We still act very much in a family way. Some might look at it and think it's a bit amateur, but we're very caring. In COVID, I looked after my staff. I continued to pay them. I got JobKeeper. Turned out I didn't need it, so I handed it back to the government voluntarily. We try and promote a nice, friendly but professional culture here. And as I said, I look after my staff. I try and help them as much as I can, whether it's financially or with things going on in their life. So I care about them, and I think that obviously has benefits because they like to stay.
That's amazing. Like during COVID, so many people just weren't able to pay their staffs or had to let their staffs go. How long was that period of you guys being closed where you just continued to pay staff despite nothing coming in? How long was that period?
It was a very interesting time when COVID hit and we all closed down. I thought, here goes a depression. And so we qualified for a JobKeeper because our turnover had dropped to, I think, 30% of what it was. All the things that we're required to do. But that did not last long. And, we ended up operating as virtually a click and collect. We had people drive up the street and they'd open their door window and the Rolex would go through and off they went. And locking Australians in Australia, they just spent like mad. They're not spending on overseas travel. They're not buying things overseas. They're obviously sitting at home wanting something to make them feel good. And instead of having a depression, we had a boom. And it was actually a lovely way to do business. I could drive into work in 10 minutes. Very eerie going to Westfield across the road, and it was completely deserted. Could have got not a person there. And we just take calls and emails from our customers and deal with them quietly in our office here. The whole shop was shut. We could only work from our office. Staff were dead keen to come to work because it was one of the only things they could do, and we just kept chugging along. So at the end, we had, as I said, such a good year. And I have to hand it to my wife. She said, "Julian, you really morally cannot keep this JobKeeper money, and it's a big debt for the country." And I thought, oh yeah, I better do my bit. And so we handed them back $100,000. And I must say, I may not have done that other than her pushing, but it was definitely the right call that she made.
I love that. What I'm noticing is that like watch brands, you guys have such a list. It's so powerful just being able to pick up the phone, go through your list, and despite the store being closed, you had people coming in, picking up. What is that outbound process like? Is there like an infinite list where, God forbid, zero marketing, your store disappeared, you can just rely on that list and that would keep you guys afloat?
No, you can never rely on that. And look, you have to realise we have been through an extraordinary period and an aberration in time with COVID. And, it depends what business you're in. You're either destroyed if you're, in the entertainment or hospitality industry, or, in luxury for whatever reason, it boomed. But, and the watches we sell, as soon as you own it, you can sell it for a premium. And that's sort of unheard of. And with the car industry, you buy a car and you can turn around in 6 months' time and sell it for more than you bought it for, which, again, in history is unheard of. Normally you buy a car and it's 20% the day you take delivery of it. So it was an aberration. And this is all normalising. It's all settling down. The government is trying to, put a lid on spending to try and get inflation down. And we're moving back into a more normal economy. So these wait lists, I'm sure, are going to dry up. And you have to keep, the storefront for promoting, being active, because if you rely on that in the long run, you'll die, because you've got to keep renewing your customers, keep keeping them excited. You can't just sit there and think you can rely on a wait list for eternity.
Yeah, talking about so that the watch market as a whole, forever it's been at a point where anyone can just walk in and get a sports model over the counter, just a random walk-in. When did that start turning? How many years ago has it been the other way around, where now customers are having to fight for a watch?
Um, Look, it depends on the brand and the model we're talking about, but in general, let's say maybe 10 years ago, it was already before COVID that there was this demand for certain collections of certain brands, whether it be Sports Rolex or Aquanaut, Patek or Nautilus or overseas from Vacheron Constantin. So that started before COVID, and COVID just turbocharged it. And just turbocharged because the demand just went up. People wanted these pieces at a time when the manufacturers were struggling with supply, and it just absolutely turbocharged the supply-demand imbalance.
Interesting. And the collectors that were collecting prior to 10 years ago, are those collectors very different to the type of collectors that you see come in? Because how I came to know about Rolex is I learned about how it holds value. It's a great sort of investment piece. You could pass it on to your children. It's great sort of a family sort of gift. And that's how I sort of first heard it, and that's why I got into it. But more than 10 years ago, that was never a thing. You can always buy a second-hand one for much, much cheaper. And I guess it maybe didn't make sense to buy a brand new one back in the day.
Look, that depends. Some people like buying pre-owned and some don't. So some want to start their own legacy and history, and others are very happy to buy a piece at a discount to new. So same with cars, everything. There's always a market for new, and there's always a market for pre-owned. We had this aberration where I could sell a brand new Rolex GMT for, let's say, it was $15,000, and if I happened to get one in for resale, I might have $20,000 on it. Ridiculous, a second-hand one more than a new one. But that was an unnatural situation, just a factor of this crazy supply-demand COVID imbalance. As I said to you before, we're going back to a more normal market, and I'm sure in time, things will drop to more realistic levels.
Makes sense. I remember going Chrono and they have that graph, and it's quite surprising how if you bought a sort of a stainless steel Datejust from 40 years ago, it's sort of kept up with inflation, if not it's beaten inflation. Is that just like the value of the minerals within the watch going up? Is it the brand? What's happening there? It seems like an actual stock, or like it feels like it's like an actual sort of investment.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think when I started here in 1989, if I remember correctly, a gold Rolex Day-Date was about $8,000 retail, and it's now what, 60,000 or so. So if you bought that watch back then for $8,000, I don't know how much it'd be worth now. It might be worth 15 or something. So if you look at that over 30 years of history, going from 8 to 15, I mean, it's probably more or less kept up with inflation. I wouldn't say you're making a huge profit on it, but it's nice to know they've got something that's of lasting value. And of course, it depends on the model you pick. I mean, if you bought a Paul Newman Daytona in 1970, you'd be laughing your head off. But they're rare occurrences that things appreciate like that.
Very cool. When it comes to collectors, when you start having more than 5, 6, 10 watches, how do you go about sort of storing it? Do people just have it in their wardrobe? Collectors that have more than 20, what do they do? What's the best way to sort of store watches?
Well, I have the perfect answer to that because 5 years ago we started selling Bourbon Zorweg safes, and I thought, oh, this might be a nice little thing for our customers, a nice added service for them. I cannot believe how many safes we've sold and how much people love them. And so you put your watches in, they keep the watches wound, you've got spare storage for passports and documents, whatever you want. And it's so cool when you open the safe and there's 20 watches all wound, ready to go. Just pick the one you want. So, when you get to a big enough collection, people do look at that. We're having the phenomenon now where there's a lot of people building homes and they're actually designing areas for these safes to go. And so that's one way to handle a big collection. Others, put them in security, very security places around, whether it's vaults or what have you. Some have their own internal safes at home. They've all got different ways of handling.
That's super cool. Have you ever had any yearn to expand the franchise again, or are you going all in on the one store in Sydney at the moment?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Back in the early 2000s, Perth was booming, and I went over there, did a couple of trunk shows over there, and I spoke to my mum at the time. I said, "Oh, maybe we should consider a branch in Perth." And she said, "Julian, when we had 100 branches around the country, we had so much trouble controlling it, theft, all that kind of thing. You'd be flying across the country." And she said, "No, I really don't think we should do that." And she was 100% right. I've been asked to open boutiques for many brands. I've been asked to open branches. And at the end of the day, what I love about my business is the personal contact with my suppliers, my staff, and my customers. And I can only be one place at one time. So, if I had a branch somewhere else, I could have a nice customer come in and I'm not here because I'm somewhere else. And I, I'm not trying to build an empire. I like a nice lifestyle, not too complicated. As I say, I like the personal touch. And having another branch would just be another worry for me, another complication in my life. And I think the old adage, small is beautiful, applies to me.
I love that. When it comes to sort of growing the store and growing your clientele, has there been a lot of word of mouth, just store walk-ins? People just see the brand walking by your store? Do you find it sort of as older clients, I guess, go to that next chapter of their life, they might be buying less watches, and every customer that stops buying watches, you get a new customer coming in, and it doesn't really stack? Or how do you get it to stack and have that flywheel effect kick in?
So I think I've used this word a few times during this interview, consistency. We've been consistent at this location 50 years. We've kept advertising 50 years. We spend 7 figures a year on promoting the brand. So people know where we are and we've got our name out there. On top of that, we've got some brands that people seek out, a number of brands. So I could not advertise and people would come and find me anyway. But my agreement with the various brands is they want me to promote as well, and it's actually for the benefit of myself and the brand that everybody does that and does their part to keep the name in the forefront of people's minds. So we get traffic both through our own promotion, through being here so long. We get a lot of business through referral. That's the absolute best business you can get. A lot of our customers refer others to us. So when someone walks in, they've already got a positive frame of mind about you because you've been recommended there. We're very thankful for that, and they're our most valuable source of business. Repeat business, of course, is very important to us too. So then answering your question about the cycle of clients, you're 100% right. At some stage, people have enough. They don't need more. They stop collecting. God forbid they might pass away. So you always need to have an eye to the next generation. I love when the next generation of our current customers come. There's nothing better than that. When I see the children of people I've been dealing with 10, 20, 30 years coming through, that's gold. But then we also need to introduce new customers to the store. And so, it's a balancing act between looking after our existing, but knowing we also need to try and do the best we can to foster a new clientele as well.
Yeah, Julian, how do you guys go about sort of looking after and sort of absorbing new clientele? Because I remember there's like a competitor in Sydney where I've went into their store twice, and both times I've been shunned. So I don't know if I'm gonna go back anytime soon. And I guess because I'm a new customer, I have no history with them, and maybe they just want to focus on the current clientele. But how have you guys gone about sort of bringing in new clientele and sort of making sure they're looked after?
Yeah, so I've been very conscious. I've said to you on a couple of occasions, there's been aberration in the market. COVID, certain brands, you could sell anything you get to anybody. So it's been pretty simple. But, we're a long-term business and you don't want to be arrogant because these things don't last forever. And if you have a customer come in and they ask for a piece that you can't supply, still have to treat them in a very, very respectful way and explain to them why you cannot, and and do as much as you can to promote the brand to them, and try and give them some hope that when things change you might be able to help them, because people have a very, very long memory, and if you get arrogant when times are good, when times are difficult and you're searching for customers, they will remember. They'll remember who was polite and looked after them and who wasn't. So I've always tried to keep my feet on the ground, and not take this as a time that I lose my head and just flip people off. And so service is very, very important to us. Important to the brands we represent. It's important to us. We need to cross the T's, dot the I's. We need to be human, and so I hope that will be appreciated by the people we deal with. And of course, we do have it where people come in, having not bought a, let's say, Patek Philippe, and they ask for an order. And it's almost impossible to help them with that. And they've got to understand that you need to grow with the brand. You don't start with the hardest thing and cherry pick. Just because everyone wants a Nautilus, I want a Nautilus too. They have other ranges, Calatravas, ellipses, gondolas, all that kind of thing. And so people also do need to be a bit realistic that you need to grow with the brand. You just can't go to the hardest thing and get going.
Yeah, do you have any advice for the listeners that might want to start their own watch collection? What's your advice for them when it comes to growing with a brand, growing with a boutique, building that relationship, getting that rapport, building that collection? Any advice for them?
Look, I think is find a retailer that you think you have a nice vibe with, who you can trust and acting ethically. Probably be consistent with that retailer. In terms of buying a product, buy what you like. Don't necessarily get carried away with having something just because it's hard to get. At the end of the day, because that hard to get thing that might be selling at a premium at the moment, in a few years' time mightn't be, and then you bought something you don't really want. I would try and look past that and look at, what's your aesthetic? What do you really appreciate? What are the functions you really want? What brand really speaks to you? And don't be too influenced by, rarity and hard to get pieces just for the sake of it.
I love that advice. We have a huge audience when it comes to marketing online, sort of e-commerce. So I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on marketing. How do you guys go ahead and market your brand? How do you spend that 7 figures a year? Is it on TV ads, newspapers, social media? Yeah.
We don't do TV, but we do a bit of the rest of it. We're very active on digital. And interesting, Rolex is very, very active on digital. They're very, very strong on digital. And other brands, we do campaigns with other brands, Grand Seiko, Tudor, Patek Philippe. So there's a digital component of it, which is beyond me. That's why I have young people like my daughter to guide me, and my marketing manager Jackie to guide me on that. Yes, we've been very consistency. That word again. We've been in Qantas every month forever, in the AFR every month forever. So we're always in, what we consider to be high-profile publications that we hope that our audience looks at. We do a lot of events, and they're actually value for money, probably the best thing we do. We just had an event for Grand Seiko, which we had, I think, near 100 people to introduce a new product. It was a lovely display on, some of their crafts and what makes Grand Seiko special. We sold some beautiful pieces as a result of that night. Leveraging our own customers, probably the best value we have in terms of our marketing spend. We do a monthly EDM to our clients just to keep them up to date with what we're doing. And we have a lot of direct contact. Of course, my staff know our clients. We might have something come in, so they'll ring up and say, "Oh, I've just got the end of this. Think you could be interested in it? We can, something that's for you." So I guess we do all the traditional sort of marketing that people do at the moment.
When it comes, it sounds like a lot of your marketing is sort of brand type marketing on the sort of Australian Financial Review, Qantas. It's not something that you can directly, there isn't a direct return on investment. Yeah, how do you go about allocating budget towards something that you don't know if it's sort of bringing customers in? Like, how do you sort of do that? Yeah.
It's very difficult. You were 100% right. We don't get a direct result almost from anything we do. I don't put an ad in Qantas for Patek Philippe and get 10 phone calls from it. But if you speak to advertising and marketing people, it's all about brand awareness. And so, and someone might not be in the market for that particular Patek Philippe the day we advertise it, but they'll think, oh, J Farren-Price or Patek Philippe, and when they come to look for one, they might come and see us. So you've got to be waving the flag all the time and just keeping that name out there, so that when people are in the mood, that they have you as top of mind as a potential retailer of that product.
That's awesome. What do you see the next 10 years looking like for your store, Julian? Do you want to sort of bring in more brands, launch new products like, you have vaults, so that's a brand new SKU. Do you want to do other type of products? What do you see the next 10 years looking like?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you two conflicting things. One is we're about to take on a new brand, which is H. Moser, which I'm very, very excited about. And I think that will be our last brand that we take on, because we simply don't have space for more. And much like the watchmakers who want to do more with less, we probably do too. So there's the old saying, you can't be a jack of all trades and master of none. So you've got to pick your selection that you believe in and that you want to represent, and you need to do that well. And so I think we've reached our capacity for brands. As I'm thrilled with the group we've got, because they have a nice cross section of appeal. They don't tread on each other's toes too much. There's something there for everybody. They're all good brands to deal with. They're all respectful brands. They're all solid brands. So, yes, I want to do more with what I've got than increase the offering. That's what I'm looking for in the future. And as for the next 10 years, look, I think it's more of the same. We have, as I said, no plan for any more branch. I just want to make what we've got here better and better and better. I've been invested in stock like nobody else. I could have one of the best stock holdings in the country in watches and jewellery. In fact, I would go as far as saying nobody in the country has the range of watches and jewellery that we have. And so I've lived a pretty conservative life, and I've just continually reinvested in the business and tried to make it better and better and better. When we expanded here 5 years ago, I spent $5 million rebuilding this place, and it's changed the whole dynamic. And we have a plan coming up for next year, which I can't quite divulge yet. It doesn't involve us moving, but it might be something else special that's going to happen. And as I said, I just want to make the experience here at J Farren-Price the best it can be.
I love how focused you are on the customer experience. In doing so, being more focused on the current brands you hold, does that mean you'll be able to get more supply? How does that work? Is it the more you sell, the more these brands will give you a more supply of watches? Can you deepen that relationship? Is it a time-based thing where the longer you work with them, the more watches they'll give you each quarter?
Well, as I said, on the one hand, the brands are increasing their production. On the other hand, they tend to be reducing their distribution. But that should mean that I would, as a representative of them, I get a larger supply. So I think if you're with a brand, you have a bright future. They obviously trust you. They want to increase their business, and they want to increase their business with us. Obviously, you don't want to be the other side of that, where you're one that they sack. I have had that experience in the past, and which is deeply emotional for me. But I think with the brands we have at the moment, I have great confidence in them that they're happy with us, we're happy with them, and we're supportive of each other, and I can only see growth ahead.
Is it true where like every 5 years, Rolex would have all their dealers revamp the Rolex showroom, and you're going to have to renovate it, and it's sort of like an enforced thing that Rolex does, and sort of the authorized dealers have to front the cost for that renovation?
I don't think it's quite as black and white as that. I think Rolex will look at your offering, and if it's matching their image, that's fine. But if they think you need to update to bring it up to the current standard, they will ask you to. So it's not a fixed every 5 years thing. It's just, there's a certain look they want. And if you have it, that's good. And if you don't, you need to change it.
That's awesome. Julian, how old were you when you sort of started working at your store? Was it straight away when your sort of mother took on it?
No. I left school in 1981. I did a BCom at New South Wales University. I then spent 5 years in chartered accounting. I became a chartered accountant. I must say I did not enjoy accounting, but it was an excellent background for being in business. Very, very important. So although it was hard at the time, I'm very, very glad I did it. Then in '89, I qualified as a chartered accountant. I was working at Dewsbury's in insolvency and receivership, which again was a very eye-opening experience, showing you how people got themselves into trouble. And you'd get appointed a administrator of a business, and you go in, you take the front door keys from the owner, you take his company car keys, and you fire the staff and deal with the creditors, and he'd want to know where their money was, and it was very eye-opening. Not the most wonderful way to make a living. So I'm glad I did that for 18 months. But when I qualified as a chartered accountant, I thought, oh, now's the time to join the family business. And my mum, who died in 2018, if you asked her, she said, oh, I never intended for Julian to join the family business. And he came to me and asked me to join. I was set up from the beginning to be in the business, even from my name starting with a J, like my father John and J Farren-Price. Her pushing me away to do accounting. It was always the plan. But she had a different view of history than what I do.
Yeah, I've noticed that, I have a friend, his family imports sort of Asian goods to Australia, and both his brothers, they're all in the family business, and all the sort of competitors, none of their kids want to do anything with importing, exporting. And when I meet his father, I definitely want to ask him, like, how did you sort of create something where all three of your sons have joined the family business? And I guess it's probably what you said earlier, sort of not pressuring it, not sort of putting it on your daughters, but sort of subconsciously having the offer always there.
Look, a family business can be a great alternative for a young person. My mother always said, Julian, if you own your own business, you have worries, but at the end of the day, no one can ever sack you. And with our history and the relationship we have for my children to step in this family business, they could have a wonderful business going ahead, lovely lifestyle, if that's what they want, which they may or may not want. But it's not all roses, because I was for a number of years a member of the Executive Connection, which was for business owners to go and meet and talk about issues, and also get some outside coaching and what have you. And the number one thing that we talked about was dysfunctional family businesses and partnerships. And so it can work very, very well, or it can work very, very badly. I was the only child of my mother, so I never had any other siblings to deal with in this business. I worked here from 1989 till 2018. I never asked my mother for a shareholding in this business. I always trusted her that she would leave it to me, which she did. So it was a very, very simple transition. I wasn't dealing with other siblings. And you can have the issue where, whether it's family businesses or partnerships, where people want to go at different speeds, they have different objectives. One might want to go into debt and grow the business, very, very strongly. The other one might be more conservative or close to the end of their career and, don't want to take the risk. One might want to work hard, one doesn't. One want to bleed the business of money, one doesn't. And, there's definitely two sides to the coin. My problem is, being the only one, is my succession plan, as we've already discussed. So on the one hand, I'm the master of my own destiny at the moment. I can make any decision I want in relation to this business. I don't have to answer anybody. But the flip side of that is I am the only one. So if anything happens to me, um, don't have a very clear succession plan. So there's pluses and minuses.
Yeah, it's pretty inspirational what Bernard Arnault did with his whole LVMH sort of group, where each one of his children take on like Tiffany and Co. or like Louis Vuitton, and he's somehow masterfully created a amazing succession plan. But succession is definitely something that I'm starting to hear more and more. It's definitely something that I guess people have to consider, and I guess I'm too young, so I've never had to think about that. But I guess succession is a big thing.
Huge, huge. You know, when before my mother passed away, and as I said to you, I never asked for a shareholding. If someone had come along and offered the right amount of money for the business, I reckon I would have given a pen to sign the check. But the moment it became mine, the whole feeling changed. The, the legacy rested with me, and it was now mine. And it just changed the whole way I felt about the business, you know. And then suddenly I think, oh, I've got to take this forward into the future. Uh, you know, potentially maybe my children will come into it. I've got to look after this name, and it's a very, very different feeling. So yes, what's going to happen with the future, I don't know. As I said, at the moment I love this business, and I'm looking forward to a long career in the future. I do have some key staff, as we've talked about. I've got long-term staff here that are stepping up and taking more and more load off me, and doing things on my behalf, and I'm trusting them with that. So, you know, I do have some people coming through, even if it's not family.
Throughout the last 20, 30 years, has the brand always been a steady upward trend? Has there been tough periods where you guys were about to go broke? Are there any sort of tough stories that you can share with the audience that could relate?
Yeah, so in 1980, I joined in 89. My mother bought my father out of this business in about the mid 1980s. And Dad retired up, they divorced, Dad retired up to Queensland. She paid a lot of money to Dad at that time. And it's very, very interesting. She had a lot of trouble borrowing money as a woman in business back in the mid 80s. Banks didn't want to lend money to a woman, if you can believe that. And when I joined the business in 89, you know, she had a seven-figure debt. The company was much smaller at that time. We had high interest rates. Then in the 90s, about 94, we had a recession. And so we went through some very, very tough times. I remember my mum, up until 2008, I think we had a handwritten cash book, and she would write out checks to creditors, and a check would go in the mail as some money came through the front door. It was really hand to mouth, really hand to mouth. Now, she never let anyone down. And there's some interesting story about the recession, about people who supported it and people who didn't. And I think that might have been very formative on me, because I am anti-debt. I don't owe a dollar to anybody. So, you know, we had some tough times in the 90s, but the turning point was the Olympics in 2000. We had nearly sold out of Rolex during the Olympics. Then we had the lead up to the GFC in 2008, where executives were getting paid big bonus and big money, and they were spending like crazy. In 2008, they all disappeared. Just at the moment, the Chinese came and started from overseas and started buying like crazy. And that stopped about 2015. And then the local Chinese became the big hitters. And then 2019, we had COVID, which ended up being a boom. And so we've had 24 years of sunshine. And it's just, for the last 24 years, our turnover has increased every year. And I have to say, we've been consistent, but we've been very lucky. We've worked hard. As they say, you make your own luck. We've worked hard, but we've had some things go our way as well. So it's been an incredible run.
I love that. Out of curiosity, when you have so many different staffs, how do you allocate sort of supply to the different staff? Could each staff have their own clientele? And yeah, how do you go about that? That must be like a whole matrix.
Yeah, that's one of the most difficult parts of my job now is the allocation of product. Uh, let's say Patek or Rolex, they come out with a new model and we get two for the year, and I come back to 40 inquiries from top existing customers. How do you hand those two watches out? And the big problem is, because we do a lot of events together, our customers get to know each other, which I love. I love getting my customers together. They might become friends, they might do business together. I love it, but the thing is, they know each other. And so if I allocate you a hard to get Aquanaut, and you've got a friend who's also a customer, and you come to me, well, how come you got the Aquanaut and I didn't? And it's sort of a lose-lose situation for me. I have to be very, very careful. And in answer to your question about how I do it with staff, I don't have a formal procedure. So Patek and Rolex, they give me an allocation, and I don't then go to the staff and say, this is your allocation per staff member. It's a little more case by case, and they present the demand from a customer for me. We'll analyse and we'll say, well, what have they had in the past? Are they basically deserving of that piece? And it's very much it's a very difficult process, but it's very much a one-on-one analysis of what we're going to do with these very hard to get pieces.
When you look at your top 40 customers, your top 40 collectors, what do collectors look like? Are they people who just love watches and they'll probably wear all 50 of the watches they have? Are they investors? Are they people who just like keeping it in storage and like looking at their watches? How much percent of collectors actually wear all their watches, or a lot of them investors? But as you said, investing has only been, it's not even, it keeps up with inflation only.
Look, we get different types of customers who fall into all those categories you just mentioned. Um, I would say on the whole, our customers buy and wear. Not many just put them away, and I'm not very, very supportive of that. I don't believe you have a Ferrari and keep it in the garage. And Rolex and Patek and all the brands, they're not making their watches for people to speculate or to put away as an investment. They're making them to wear. And so that's our ideal customer, somebody who buys them to wear. Obviously, when you get a big collection, you're going to wear them very occasionally. But that's what we prefer, is someone who wants them because they appreciate and that they actually want to use it. But you get all sorts. There's no doubt you get all sorts. And you get some that just look at the brands. They will only look at one brand and nothing else. And more, I will say, you get people who now shop across different brands.
I love that. Julian, I'd love to go over one, your most worn watch, two, the watch you bring to black tie events, and three, sort of a collector's dream watch that you own. One of each.
Over the last 30 years, the watch I have worn the most is a black bezel GMT Rolex. I beat that poor thing. I got that for 20 years of being here, so that was in 2009. And for about 15 years, 14 years, I wore that non-stop to the gym, ocean racing, never let me down. Unbelievably good watch. Then a little while ago, I traded in from a customer a rose gold Yachtmaster on Oysterflex, and I'd always liked that watch since it was released many years ago. So I've been wearing that. The black tie and the collectible question is the same watch. Patek Philippe did a end of run green dial stainless steel Nautilus, and they did one of them with a baguette diamond bezel. We were very lucky to get allocated one, and I kept that for myself. And it's if I'm going to a black tie, that's a beautiful watch to wear. And in terms of collectability, it's a unicorn. I also have some Grand Seiko, which I proudly wear. In fact, I'm wearing one today with a beautiful blue dial. It was a 60th anniversary piece that they did. and it's a highly accurate watch to, I think, about 5 seconds a year. It's very comfortable, and I feel very nice when I'm wearing it. And I have a lovely Vacheron Constantin, a very Art Deco historic piece on a lovely gold bracelet, which I like the vintage side of that, and it doesn't see a lot of action, but it's a beautiful, beautiful watch.
That's awesome. Over like a period of 7 days, how many different watches will you rotate? Do you do one watch a day, or do you have your Yachtmaster Oyster as like a main daily, and you're wearing that majority of the time?
At the moment, my main daily has been the Yachtmaster. I like it because I'm terribly rough on watches, and with its ceramic bezel and its Oyster Flex rubber bracelet, there's very little to scratch. Although I have managed, I went to Fiji recently and I fell over in a bushwalk and put a good scratch on the clasp that I can identify as my Fiji mark. But that's really, and my wife loves that watch on me too. It's a comfortable watch to wear. That Oyster Flex is super comfortable. As I just said, there's little to scratch on it. It's waterproof. It's accurate. It's a really good watch to live with.
Yeah, because I've always wondered. I'm probably most similar to you, where I have a watch where I wear daily, and then I guess based on occasions, I'd find a watch that would fit that occasion. So, besides my daily Yachtmaster 40, I'm not getting too much wear on my other watches, and I only have 3, 4 other watches. I'm imagining like if someone had 40, that'd be even harder to go through.
Yeah, look, there are people who will wear a different watch with a different outfit. They'll really coordinate everything. I'm probably too lazy, and I do like just to wear one watch, put it on for a while, and maybe I'll wear it for extra weeks, and then I think, it's time for change. I'll go from my Rolex to my Grand Seiko or my Vacheron. And the Patek I mentioned to you is definitely a special occasion piece. It's not something I would trot out very often, but when you go out at night in a dinner suit, as you mentioned, it makes you feel very, very special. So yeah, so I'm not one that's constantly changing watches. I'm more, and I need the convenience of having just something on that I wear for weeks at a time.
I love that, Julian. Last two questions we usually always wrap up this podcast with. One, any recent discoveries that you've implemented to your day-to-day life?
Yeah, look, I'll go back 2 years if that's recent enough, and I'd say yoga. I turned 60 this year. I've always kept fairly active, but as you get older, flexibility becomes more and more important. I still go to the gym a few times a week, but yoga, I do a couple of classes a week with my wife. We have someone come home, and that has made a hell of a difference to my life. And I could highly recommend it to anyone who's getting more mature, because the old thing of use it or lose it. We sit down a lot, shorten your muscles, and to keep flexible, I think, is really important to the quality of your life. And so that's the thing I'll say.
I love that, Julian. And last question, any personal sort of goals or focus for the next 6 months?
Well, I mentioned just then that I turned 60 in April, and I've had a real festival this year. I've never had so many holidays in my life. And of course, with that lifestyle comes a bit of extra kilos. So the next 6 months, the festival's over. It's time to work hard, but it's also time to work hard on my body. So I'm going to get lean and mean.
Love that. Julian, where can people get more of you? Where can they find your brand and follow sort of J Farren-Price? Yeah.
Well, we've got the usual the locations, our website, our Instagram, our Facebook, or even better, come and see us. We're a very personal business, and there's nothing like face to face and having experience of coming into the store and meeting us. We like to get to know our customers. You mentioned before earlier, we were talking about online sales. That's something that we have the facility to do, but I don't really seek to do that much, because I really want to know who's purchasing the product from us, and not do a faceless thing or a send them a mail. I mean, if people need it because it's not convenient, sure, we can do it, but it's not really our focus. We want to know the people we deal with.
I love that. Thank you so much, Drew. And I love this chat. I learned so much. It's so amazing. You're so patient. I think the key takeaways were sort of consistency, being long term, and you're so customer centric. And that's sort of, you've been consistently talking about these key sort of actions, themes. And I think that was the main takeaway. And I think our audience will get a lot of value from this. So thank you so much for your time today.
Andy, it's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for your interest.
Thank you, Julian. Guys, if you made it this far into the episode, hopefully you guys got some value, and we'll see you guys next week on another episode of the podcast. Peace. Awesome. Thank you so much, Julian. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming on. Hope you have a beautiful upcoming weekend, and this was a fun episode.
Okay, thanks, Andy. You take care, and you have a good weekend too.
Thanks,
Okay,
Julian.
bye.
Bye.